This is a Tab Media special report on how the church can respond to human trafficking. I'm Jennifer Rash, and joining me is Doug Gilmer, senior law enforcement official with experience investigating human trafficking. Doug, thank you. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, so human trafficking is not a new topic. We know that. Human trafficking has been, I don't even know the history, how long, but I know that here at Tab Media, we have covered human trafficking for more than 15 years, all the bits and pieces of it. But every so often, news events and different things happen that kind of resurfaces the topic and brings it back to just interest among a lot of people. And so right now is one of those times. Human trafficking has been in the news a lot lately. But the thing that our audience would be most interested in is how can the church family, people of faith, how can they make a difference? How can they be involved? How can they help? And so with all of your experience, so you've got all this 30 plus years of law enforcement and all that you've done, and now working in a lead area with human trafficking investigations. Just talk to us a little bit about all that you see and all that you've experienced and how churches can start to fit into this picture.
Sure. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. This is not a new topic.
Okay.
Actually, one of the first recorded instances of human trafficking in history is in the Bible.
Oh, good point.
Actually, the account of Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers
Okay.
is actually one of the first written accounts of human trafficking in history,
That I
predating.
never thought about it that way,
Yeah, predating the Dakota Hammurabi, and I mean, if looking at it from a historical perspective, but there you have an instance where someone was being sold into into slavery, and then we have other accounts throughout Scripture of human trafficking as well, including Rahab and others. So, and as a nation, we've recognized this to be an issue since really 1875 was the first piece of legislation that was written to address human trafficking. It wasn't, we didn't call it human trafficking in 1875. We called it something different, but at the end of the day, that's what it was. I think that the church actually plays a very important role in combating human trafficking. If the church will recognize what their role is, what their particular lane is, and if they'll stay within that lane, I think that they can provide a lot of support, not only to law enforcement, but also to the victims or the survivors of human trafficking. The fact that the church has historically not taken a bigger role in this is sad, because it does impact the church. And I know, throughout my 30 plus years of law enforcement at the state and local level, and now the federal level, that we're routinely arresting church members who are facilitating human trafficking by paying for commercial sex, and we're recovering or rescuing victims of human trafficking, young girls, young women who've been exploited through this crime, who have grown up in the church, whose parents are members of the church, but they're being sucked into a lifestyle through online grooming and other things, and they're falling prey to this crime. So it's not, the church is not immune to human trafficking.
Do you think is it just too icky of a topic? Is it just too uncomfortable?
And that's it. It's discouraging to me, because we've attempted to engage other faith-based organizations or churches in particular. And oftentimes we're essentially told in not so many words, this is not a topic that we want to discuss.
Okay.
It's not a pleasant topic. It's a very, very ugly topic. And so to delve into exactly what human trafficking is and how people are exploited and how it affects them emotionally, the trauma and that kind of thing, it is not it is not a PG-13. I mean, it's not just a PG-13 topic.
Right.
It's a very sensitive topic. And I think the thought process is, one, we're going to offend people if we discuss it. Two, if we get involved, that means that we're probably going to have some of these people in our congregation, and they honestly don't know how to deal with that, or again, they're afraid of the perception and how others in that congregation might perceive some of those victims or survivors of human trafficking. And then, we get told we don't have a problem with that here, or
Yeah.
even coming in innocently and saying, hey, let us just talk to your kids. Let us talk to the folks in your student ministry about online exploitation and grooming and the way that kids get sucked into these things. And we're told, no, that is a topic that parents need to address with their kids. We don't need to address that here. The problem is they're not addressing it at home. That's why we keep recovering so many of these kids that are being victimized, that are being exploited, because it's not being discussed at home. It's not being monitored.
Mm. And just to get my head around all of it, there's an entire department, is that the right word? An entire group of people working this all the time, right? Human trafficking,
Yes,
it is so big.
it is. Yeah, it's a big industry. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge industry. I mean, I think globally, the Department of State estimates that it's $150 billion a year industry. We estimate just in the Birmingham metropolitan area that the commercial sex industry, which would include human trafficking, not specifically limited to human trafficking, because there is a difference between human trafficking and prostitution. But the commercial sex industry, a pretty conservative estimate is about $110 million a year, business. You go 2 hours, down the road to Atlanta, and you're looking at a metro area it's about a $290 million a year industry. It makes a lot of money. There's a demand for it. People have money to pay. Unfortunately, as long as that demand for sex is there and people have money, this isn't an issue that's going to go away. And as professionals, we have to be ever vigilant, and be on guard to investigate these crimes and hold the perpetrators responsible. But also at the same time, we have to be willing to take care of the victims. This is a multifaceted crime. And so prosecution of these crimes is just one particular segment of combating human trafficking. If we're not doing anything for the victims, if we're not seeing them put into care, if we're not seeing them stabilized, if we're not seeing them restored, then we're not really fulfilling the call of justice. Okay. We're actually serving an injustice to the victims.
So you've got, all of these layers. So you've got the ministries and the services that are out there for the victims, and I'm sure you work with some of those. And then you have just the criminal aspect of what's going on. Is there an angle as well, or would it be worth thinking about of how to stop the problem so there's no demand? Is there something there that could happen as well? Like because supply and demand, right? If there's no demand, right, with the industry itself.
Well, we do operations in which we target the demand, in which we do stings to target Johns or commercial sex buyers. Okay. So we always see kind of a decrease in the demand for commercial sex when we do a big operation, and maybe we arrest 30 or 40 people over a weekend who've been answering online ads. There's a slight reduction in the demand, but at the end of the day, and I know that you know this, and I know that listeners know this, it's a matter of the heart. And as law enforcement, we're very good. We can arrest ourselves out of a problem.
Right.
We can't fix stupid, but we can put handcuffs on stupid. Right?
Makes sense.
And we're good at arresting ourselves out of a problem. We can provide these other services, but the thing that we cannot do is change the heart of man. There's only one thing out there that will change a man's heart or a woman's heart, because this is not a crime that is with strictly male suspects or female victims. It goes both ways. And so we can't do that alone. And I think history has taught us that there has never been a significant movement or a significant change in a community without the involvement of the local church. And there's good reason for that. And so as long as man still has a corrupt heart, there's still going to be corruption. We're never going to be able to probably solve this problem once and for all. We're never going to have a year where someone isn't being exploited. And a lot of the exploitation that is seen on TV and on the media, it's out there, it's public, it's happening. A lot of what you see is dealing with adult victims, but there's a whole nother segment out there of just minor victims, where we see a lot of minors, a lot of children who are being trafficked by family members, and or close family relations. And that's very hard for us to detect. We often don't find out about those things until a school teacher or a DHR worker or a hospital worker uncovers those signs and makes a call to law enforcement, because it's not out there. They're not placing ads for these kids. The kids are being trafficked within the home, to other relatives or to friends and that kind of thing.
I almost can't even comprehend that. That's so difficult. Well, you put your minister hat on for a second, because you do have background there, educated through Christian universities and schools, and currently working on your PhD.
PhD. Correct.
From, I'm forgetting, Columbia International, right?
Correct.
Okay. So a Christian background in education, but also ordained through a Southern Baptist church, if I'm remembering correctly.
Correct.
So law enforcement, ministry, all of that placed together, back to the corruption of the heart. So what does that look like, if you're talking to a church setting to get to the grace of God and to get to the moment where we could change some hearts? What would that look like in just an everyday church setting with everyday people?
One of my favorite verses in all of Scripture is Proverbs 21:15. And in the New King James, it says, "It is a joy for the just to do justice."
Ooh, yes.
And I think we have to look at it from that mindset, and we have to think about what role the local church can play in that just role. I think if we look back to the Old Testament, in the Old Testament, in Joshua, we meet a woman by the name of Rahab. And in the Old Testament, Rahab is known as Rahab the harlot. And every time Rahab is mentioned in Scripture in the Old Testament, she is Rahab the harlot, Rahab the harlot, Rahab the harlot, or Rahab the prostitute, depending on the translation you use. And that's her identity. That's all she's ever been known for. But it's an amazing story, because you look at how, even though she was trapped in that lifestyle, you look at how God guided her life, where he specifically placed her and her residence on the wall, the gifts that God had given her, the access that she had been given to the king, the trust that had been developed with the king so that he would believe her story. All of these things happening in the background to help deliver the city of Jericho, right, to God's people. The most incredible picture of grace, in my opinion, is in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. It's the genealogy of Jesus Christ. It's the chapter, the verses that we always want to skip over, especially in the Old Testament, right?
Right.
And when we're doing the 1 year,
All the names.
right? Yeah, all the 1 year reading plan. We just want to skip through it as fast as we can.
Right.
But in Matthew chapter 1, it says that that Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Period.
You're right. No identifier.
No identifier.
Wow.
And to me, the fact that Boaz and Boaz being the grandfather of King David and the direct lineage of Jesus Christ, to me, that is the most extreme picture of grace in all of the Bible. Even when Matthew was written, her identifier was left off. She was no longer Rahab the harlot. She was Rahab, the great grandmother of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And if that is not a picture of grace, and if God is willing to and able to transform someone like Rahab and put her in his lineage to be a great grandmother of Jesus Christ, if he's willing to go to that extreme, why aren't we?
Ooh, ouch.
And so the woman who is known today or identified today by her occupation or by her exploitation, tomorrow is set free through salvation and into a brand new life. And we see that transformation happen on a regular basis. We work with the Well House, up here, and with Carolyn Potter and her staff, and the transformation that can take place in the lives of these women who have been exploited and victimized, almost all of them since they were kids, even though they might be 25 or 30 now. They've been exploited their entire lives, and they come out of that. And we work with a faith-based organization called Trafficking Hope that's headquartered here in Birmingham, a national organization. They are our victim service provider. And every time we do an operation, an enforcement operation, anytime we go out to recover a victim, they're right there with us.
Okay.
They may not go through the door with us. They're not putting handcuffs on people, obviously.
Oh, that would be fun to get to be able to.
Yeah. But the moment that we can, the moment that we can recover a victim,
Right.
who is not going to want to talk to us anyway at that particular moment, and we can hand them to an advocate, it's such a big change for them, because they automatically assume, because the way things used to be done in law enforcement was the woman would get arrested and charged with prostitution. And we don't do that.
Wow.
We take a victim-centered, trauma-informed approach to the way that we do our investigations, and we understand that they're victims. They are being forced, coerced, into this lifestyle. They really don't have a choice in doing what they're doing. And so in what other crime do we arrest victims? When is the last time law enforcement arrested a homicide victim in order to help them?
Wow. Yeah.
So we don't. So why are we doing it for this crime? So if we can have an advocate there, a trained advocate, who knows their role. They're not there. They're not there to invite them to their small group next Thursday night. They're not there to invite them to Sunday school. They're just there for the victim. They're just there to be the hands and feet.
Mm.
They're just there to show the love of Christ in a very tangible way, but to talk to that victim and get that victim somewhere where they can receive help. And when that happens, and they realize that, hey, these people that are here, that this collaboration of folks that are here, they do care about me.
Wow.
They're really not going to arrest me. They're really here trying to help me. And it pays dividends for us on the law enforcement side down the road, because we get better cooperation down the road. Once that victim is stabilized, we can go back and talk to them, and they're much more likely to cooperate with us. While at the same time, they're receiving that wraparound care, that restorative care that they need to get back into back onto a firm foundation for life. And those are the ways that the church can be involved, whether it's being involved with the Well House, or adopting Trafficking Hope's CARES curriculum that's designed to teach local churches how to engage in this process, and getting volunteers involved from the local church to participate with Trafficking Hope, to be a victim advocate, to help transport victims for us to the Well House, or whatever the case might be, to help do some of that community outreach. There's a lot of different things that the church can do. Just knowing that the church has a particular role and there's a particular lane, and they've got to stay, they need to stay in that lane. Because one of the biggest misperceptions among law enforcement in working with faith-based organizations is that they're only coming in to evangelize. And that's not the group's goal. I mean, their faith
ultimately maybe, but
ultimately maybe,
yeah, not in this moment.
and their faith is what makes their passion so real for this. But the immediate goal is just providing services and providing assistance to that victim.
But in a sense, that's actually showing, like you said, that's showing Jesus to them, even though they may not be using all the churchy words or the evangelizing techniques. They are loving and showing Jesus in a tangible way, but then
Right.
making a difference and helping. But I hear what you're saying. It needs to be very clear and careful that you're not going to pull out some kind of tract and start going through something, or
right. We've probably all heard the quote, preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words.
Oh, that's good. Yes.
And so I think that's really the role. And I get out and I speak to a lot of different organizations, and I in churches and faith-based groups and that kind of thing, and on a pretty regular basis. And one of the things that I always stress is, if you're going to come out and you're going to work with law enforcement, you're working with a group of people who may not necessarily have the same biblical worldview that you do. Maybe they weren't raised in the church. Maybe they don't go to church at all. Maybe they don't even believe in God. So you're going to be put into a very uncomfortable secular situation, but you have got to learn to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And because the first time someone says something that might be off color or whatever, and you react in a certain way, they're going to pick up on that.
Right.
And you're going to limit the amount of trust that's going to be built or established. But when you're there and you're providing that level of advocacy, and you're providing, maybe the church goes out and buys dinner for all the law enforcement officers that are there that night that are volunteering. They go out and they get, Subway or Jimmy John's or whatever, and they bring that in so everybody can eat on a long night. And those are the kinds of things that help establish that rapport and help establish that trust. And just the way that they interact with victims or they interact with suspects in these cases can go a long way with actually showing the love of Christ.
Because that would be an opportunity as well. the advocate to love on and care for and help provide a safe, secure place for the victim to get to the next level. But the suspect now is vulnerable in this
Right.
moment.
And I'll tell you,
Be
when,
there too, right?
oh, definitely. And we, um, if we're doing a John sting, if we're out arresting commercial sex buyers,
Right,
um, there's a point, where we're waiting nearby, and the John comes in to meet the undercover officer, undercover agent, and the deal is made, and we're going to pop out at some point and say surprise,
right.
and 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 at that moment, um, obviously, one, they're immediately going to be scared, and but they know the gig is up.
Mhm.
They know that they're probably going to be publicly identified. Their job, their marriage, their future, everything is on the line at that moment. And so they have oftentimes there are physiological responses. Um, they may break down and cry. They
Mhm.
may begin to vomit. They may urinate on themselves. They may defecate on themselves.
Mhm.
But we still have to treat them. We still have a process that they need to go through to be booked and that kind of thing.
Right.
And even when we're doing those John stings, the advocates from Trafficking Hope, they're there, and they're there for a specific reason, and to talk with to talk with the Johns before they go to jail. And they'll come in and they'll get brought into the booking room, and again, some of these guys are just they're completely in tears because their whole world has just collapsed.
Mhm.
And these are the people that the advocates from Trafficking Hope, you would think, would absolutely detest because they're facilitating the crime. They're facilitating the injustice that they're fighting.
Mhm.
But so many times we've seen these advocates bend down, kneel down, and grab the hand of one of these sex buyers
Mhm.
and just say, "Hey, you know what? It's going to be okay," or clean up the vomit,
Oh, wow.
or help get them cleaned up, or get them clean clothes because they've messed their clothes. They can't,
Mhm.
and that
Mm. Wow.
speaks volume. And I can tell you, that, one particular, incident in particular, where one of the officers that had been participating in this event, one of the state and local guys that was there
Mhm.
had been participating for a while, and I was at a church event,
Mhm.
and I was walking out to the lobby, and I saw him up in the balcony, and he was waving at me. And I thought, boy, this is kind of strange because he's driven a long way to get here into this event.
Wow.
Had no idea he was going to be here, and he comes down, and my first words to him were, "What are you doing here?" Because he was not. I just it was what came to mind, right? And he told me, he said, "The reason I'm here is because I've seen the way that these people from Trafficking Hope
Mhm.
treat our suspects." He said, "I've seen the grace and the mercy that they give these people who don't deserve it." And he said, "It finally occurred to me, I need that same grace and mercy."
Oh, oh, wow.
And he gave his life to Christ. And so
Mm.
it's it, it's such there's such a far-reaching opportunity, that goes beyond. I mean, you don't have to walk in with a Bible. You don't have to have a pulpit. You can feed some people.
Mhm.
You can hold a person's hand.
Mhm.
You can put your arm around a person. You can drive that person to the well house, whatever the case might be. You can hand out a hygiene kit, to someone that needs it on the street. Those are all things that we can do, that may not be very public. They may not be very flashy, but they're just as important, and they're just as impactful.
Does trafficking help train people how to know ways to act, what to say, those kind of things?
They
Because I can
they
see
they
where,
do.
if
So they
so uncomfortable that it might be awkward.
Yeah, no, definitely. So Trafficking Hope, they have what they call their CARES curriculum, which is a curriculum for local churches. And then they also provide advocacy training, both at kind of an intro level and then a more advanced level of advocacy training, that includes, guest speakers, maybe such as myself, but also role playing and other things that go into this curriculum to prepare people for what they're going to see and what they're going to experience and how to act.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put the information for Trafficking Hope in the show notes, as well as information for the Well House. And is there any other place, a resource that we could drop in that would just, if somebody were trying to look for a way to be able to help or train or?
Yeah, I think um, the Department of Homeland Security actually has
Oh,
some resources online
okay.
um, that are faith-based resources for the church,
Mhm.
and how to get engaged, and some educational material. And so that's another resource.
Mhm.
But I would encourage anybody that has an interest in this, especially from the local church level, to look at organizations, like the Well House, like Trafficking Hope, A21, Unbound in Texas, Redeemed Ministries in Texas. Those are all incredible examples of organizations who are out there daily doing this work, and they're doing it the right way.
Mm. And it sounds like law enforcement could definitely use the help of the faith community.
We can definitely use the help. Like I said, we can't do it on our own.
Right.
And law enforcement, again, we're good at solving crimes. We're
Mhm.
good at putting handcuffs on people, but law enforcement, we're not trained and we're not equipped to be advocates. We're not trained and equipped to provide long-term restorative care. We can provide immediate security
Right.
and safety for a victim. Maybe we can give them a bag that's got some clothes in it and a hygiene kit and that kind of thing. But that's about as far as we can go.
Right.
We do employ victim specialists and that kind of thing. But even then, we're limited in how far we can take that level of care. And they're not trained to provide long-term care or counseling or therapy. They're trained to find those resources. And typically those resources are found through local churches or parachurch ministries.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where they get their help, and that's where the change takes place.
Mm. And just think, our wheelhouse and as a faith family, that love and grace and being the feet, hands and feet of Jesus, that's our lane.
It is.
We merge those together, we could really make a difference. So
It, absolutely.
thank you. Thanks for helping us think through it and just have some ideas about where to start, because I do know it's overwhelming and it can be intimidating. So I feel like you've given us a good start and maybe we can make a difference.
I hope so. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll have all this information in the show notes.
Thank you.